let's see. Yeah, this is, how about posting that email for people who don't get the emails? And how about Marion reading that?
Okay. All right. So the topic is Richard Sanders' Baba story. Dear folks of Baba, in Mandali Hall at Meherazad, beginning during the 1970s, one of the most favorite topics among the Mandali was the story of how each of us was drawn to Baba. They were not so much interested in the narrative of our lives, but in those first moments when Baba entered our story, when the sunlight pierced the overcast sky of our minds and hearts. They could see the loving intervention in their beloved in redeeming us from our lost condition. We have of our guest today, Rich Sander, whom I have known since the early 1970s, and surprisingly, whose story I have never heard. We go back to that time in New York City when both of us would go to see Dr. Harry Kenmore, one of Baba's intimate Mandali. For me, Harry had the most powerful presence of the Mandali, a larger than life figure with a booming voice, flashing eyes, and exuding great confidence, reminding me of an Old Testament prophet. We both benefited immensely from Harry's great love for Baba. Rich's spiritual awakening started in Colorado, where he grew up, and with his early connection to Rick Chapman and Alan Cohen, two of the younger followers of Baba, whom he had asked to spread his message of discouraging the use of drugs among the hippie generation. After his time in New York, Rich returned to Colorado and for years was part of the very active Denver group. Besides his pilgrimage to India in 1972, Rich has come to the center again and again over the last 50 years and has been a part of our Zoom sessions from his home in Grand Junction. This is roughly the outer itinerary of his life, but we will be most interested in the inner itinerary of his life with our beloved Baba. In his own words, he says, I am just learning the gift of Baba's love beyond our limited identity and struggle. We, as listeners, are invited to ask him questions to draw out his story. In his love, Jeff.
So, so yeah, Rich has been here for the last several years at, here at the gas pump, here at the here at this uh, Zoom sessions. Now, um, as I mentioned there, if you can ask him questions along the way too, feel free. I have two questions. I'm going to be bold and ask him two questions that, Rich, you can incorporate, whenever you want in your, as you share your story. But I'm always interested in what someone's religion, a religious background, if they had any, what that was. And as a young person, as a child, what was your sense of God or the divine or some higher purpose? You don't have to answer those right away, but that'll be nice if you uh, weave that into your story at some point. So here he is, the man of the hour from
Well,
Grand
hey,
Junction, Colorado.
I really appreciate this. I uh, I have been thinking about this and kind of intently for the last week, and I want to try to stay focused on, of course, Baba, how Baba actively intervened in my life. I think that's the real point. But I will start it at the very beginning. I loved being a kid. I didn't want to grow up, and I know I didn't. I loved every moment of being free, no responsibility. I didn't even know the world was around me except where it allowed me to be myself and play and have fun. And, we grew up in a nice little suburban setting in Denver called Wheat Ridge. And our little place was right near Clear Creek, which runs past Golden Coors Brewery and all that, and down onto us. So we were on the way west side of town. But so we had basically the freedom, as a lot of baby boomers did, to just roam and roam and roam. And that was pretty much childhood to me. My brother and I got along well. My sister spent all of her summers in Topeka, Kansas. So I had a summer school sister only, and I was very close to her. We still have a friendship, some kind of love that probably is from a past life. I don't know. But in any case, I relied on my mother. She was my mentor during all of my growing up. And I had a real inner conflict and struggle with having what fathers do for children is bring you into the world of reality, a connection and contact with how the world works, how they work in it, and how you must learn to deal with that. So the father sort of emancipates the boy from the mother, but I had a real struggle with all that. However, much later, I came to do a review, and that's part of my story of how I embraced my father and grew to love him and appreciate him and his intelligence and his compassion. Anyway, but so it sort of begins. I never had a lot of spiritual experiences. I was not involved particularly in any religion at all. And to be blunt, I had no interest in life other than being a kid and playing. That was it. And so I did have an experience once, though. I remembered it, a very vivid experience. And being a child, you can't verify this stuff. So I only can tell my story as I experienced it. But I think I was 5. We were in a Catholic church. My dad's mother was a very devout German Catholic. And this goes way back into the history of Germany and Catholicism. And they believed in saints for everything. They had little cards for everything. And it was very traditional. I wasn't a real part of that, but I knew that that's where sort of our family spiritual gut was, came from. But in any case, so we're in this Catholic church, and it was a brilliant, beautiful, bright, sunny morning. This place is full. Remember, it's 1955 probably, or something like that, 56. So the baby boomers, all of their parents, they're very religious culture then. And so this church was full. And so I was just looking around, sitting between my mom and dad, something like that. And suddenly I found myself at the very ceiling of this church. I was up there looking down, and I didn't realize what was going on. I could not, how could I know what was going on? But I know I was looking down on everybody, and it felt like what they call the congregation. And in the Catholic Church, ultimately that's called the that wafer they put in your mouth, that communion wafer. So that's feeling of, I guess, communion. But that ended, but I remembered it so vividly, I just never forgot it. The only other time I ever had a semi-religious experience was in a catechism in a Catholic church later in Denver. Maybe I was 12, 13, summer catechism, 2 weeks. And they showed this big slide on a screen, this projection. Remember the old slide projectors, chink, chink, chink. And it was a picture of Jesus, and he had this big heart, and all of humanity was coming out of his heart. And somehow I experienced whatever that was. That's what I experienced in that moment. And other than that, nothing was very profound for me. And nothing in life was particularly interesting for me, and nothing really grabbed me. I had absolutely no goals, ambitions. And by the time I started to realize I was growing up, and then had a car and could drive around, and it was in high school, the only thing I think that really got my attention, well, there were two things going on for me. One was I didn't feel like I belonged to this world at all. And I didn't understand why. But the only thing that I did want to do, I wanted a girlfriend. So I was searching for a girlfriend. Every girl I met, I was just searching, is this the one? Could this be possible? And finally, in my senior year, I found one. And it was very intense, very deliberate. And I think for me at that time, we dated, and I really, really wanted to have a relationship with her. So to be totally blunt, by the time we got to the end of the year and on prom night, we consummated that relationship. And then I thought, well, I'm really looking forward to this. I just had this feeling of love for this girl. And she was way above my status in life. And I mean, she was like middle class, and very lovely, intelligent, a woman named Linda. Anyway, so about the time that school ended and the summer was going to start, her mom must have found out, called my mom, and my mom told me flat out, you can never see her again. For some reason, I didn't challenge that. And I don't even know why I didn't challenge it. But of course, later I found out that she was 5 months under the age of 18. So her mom had a legal as well as maybe moral and social obligation to take care of her daughter. So that was the end of that. But years and years, I wondered why that happened that way. But later, I began to realize, had I pursued her going to Montana to be around her at college or anything like that, that wasn't a part of Baba's plan. I didn't know that then. So I went to college on my mother's dime, not having any goals, no ambitions. I thought I kind of liked psychology, but the first day of that class was remarkably dull. There was a TA and a 24-inch black and white TV, and it was like, here's your psychology. And this was for those of you who know it, an agricultural school originally. So they taught behavioral everything. You know, you eat because it tastes like a pea and you like sweet peas. That's how you eat. That's why. So there is nothing internal about agriculture. It's just the plant the seed and it grows. So I slowly dropped out of every class. And in the meantime, was pretty active. I think the president of the class was a Quaker. He and I signed a document, and it was a double spread layout in the student newspaper that semester about how to avoid the draft. So that was my big sign off for college. So in the meantime, because my mother could never figure out what was going on with me, I want to make this brief, but I'm just pointing out the very beginnings of this. I'd gone to a psychiatrist, and because of that, I got a 1Y on the draft. Remember, the draft was in effect, and if you didn't go to college, you were or join, you were going to get drafted, like a very good friend of mine in the Denver Baba group. And that was pretty horrific stuff, believe it or not. So anyway, so I wandered around. I drove around Colorado. I went to Aspen, thought I could stay there for a couple of weeks. I just wandered around. Where can I find myself, find a home, and I had no clue. And all along, it was like this, I'll call it a darkness was following me. And whatever this darkness was like, I don't know what it is. I don't know what's real. I don't know what I'm doing. So finally, I ended up back up at CSU in Fort Collins with a friend of mine from the dorm the first time around. And he was staying off campus. So I lived in a little old farmhouse with him and a couple of friends, and we sampled a few drugs as they came along. I was totally irresponsible, didn't have a job. So one day in the newspaper, this was in 1968 in the fall, probably in around October, these two guys, it was advertised, these two guys are going to come into campus and talk about not taking drugs and that you can't find God in a pill. And David Bradley, my friend, we kind of hung together. And of course, he was paying his fair share of the rent on that little house. But we decided to go. So everybody in the house went. And it was full. I mean, it was over 500 people in the studio auditorium, probably 1,000, maybe 800, but it was really full. And this town was full of drugs. Everybody sampled whatever came by. Well, anyway, so here are these two guys up, at the front of this big room, and they were talking about Avatar Meher Baba. They had come to speak to all of us to tell us that he says you cannot find God in these experiences. It's an illusion. You're not going to find anything substantial, and it could ruin your life. Anyway, so they announced after this big meeting, that they were going to have a little conference room available if you wanted to hear more about this guy, Meher Baba. So we went, and they were selling absolutely.
Rich, just one moment. That's Rick Chapman and Alan Cohen.
Yes.
Yeah.
And my memory, after seeing recently him on the Amar Tithi program, they showed some pictures of him and Alan, and it was amazing how young they were and how young I was, a bunch of hair and all this stuff. But they were so young, but, so they were our age, and there they were up there talking. Well, anyway, so I think we got a card or something, and I don't remember getting any real material of any kind, but we saw pictures of this guy, Meher Baba. So about a week later, we all got in the car, went to Boulder to a bookstore there, and got 2 copies of the 3-volume sets of discourses. And the next day or two, I was walking back from the student center, and I had one of these open, and I was looking at it. I saw the frontispiece and a little tiny picture of Baba, like passport size. And all of a sudden, it's a beautiful day, and this wave of, and I don't know how to describe it, came over me. And I mean, it was like nothing else it was kind of like in my psyche, the way I experienced it, nothing existed. It was just this wave came over me, and suddenly it was as if these are the words that stuck with it. Like if Baba were to speak to me, this was the meaning of that experience. God alone is real, and I am that reality. And that was it. I've never questioned it since. I've always known that Baba is the avatar, and that was it. However, I was a mess. So a couple of weeks later, we were, one of the guys and I were going to the basement to inject methadone, and I might have been given an overdose, I don't know, but I had what you would call, in simple terms, a psychic break from ODing on methadone. So I woke up the next morning in a hospital. They'd given me a tranquilizer, and I have to tell this part. It's when I woke up, I knew that I was not the same. There was something happened in my psyche and in my psyche, and I was damaged, but I knew who I was, and I could think, but it was as if my connection with the outer world was somehow not vivid. So I can't explain it exactly. I have a theory on that, but we'll go on. So I was devastated. I couldn't deal with the outer world. I mean, I couldn't deal with anybody. So I went back home, and I basically laid in bed, didn't do anything. Very gradually, under my parents' care and my mother's little dog, little poodle dog named Dodie, I gradually sort of felt a little safer in my psyche to start watching TV and some other stuff and blah, blah, blah. And it probably took, I don't know, 4 months. My dad finally said, he was very generous about it, very kind. He said, I think it's about time you probably should go get a job. And I didn't want to, but he suggested a place where I went, and it was a car wash. You know, you drive your car through, somebody washes all the windows inside, and they clean it up afterwards. And I got this job at the car wash, and it was really good for me because it was bringing me back out into, we'll call it, gross world reality, you know? And so consequently, that was going on. My dad had brought a car that I could drive. So I was driving back and forth, and then this guy at midnight one night, I might have the story a little convoluted here, but at midnight one night, while I was in this room, we had two cell phones. Someone called me, and I hadn't spoken to her for years. She was an old high school friend, and she was a little wild back then. And she said, "Can you pick up a friend at the airport?" And I said, "Sure." So I got in my car and I met her at her house. She climbed out a window and we went to the old Stapleton Airport in Denver, picked up this guy. And this guy was a very robust personality. He was big, you know, and he came from Farmington and he wanted to go to Wyoming and get a job in the oil fields because it was easy money and you could, you know, work as much as you want, blah, blah, blah. He had a wife and two kids in Farmington. So I said, sure, but all I had was this car and nothing. So I went to my cousin and gas was cheap and he gave me $10 and we drove to Gillette, Wyoming, right there. I didn't tell my parents anything. I just drove off, you know, that's my brain. But anyway, so we got up there and drove back down to Denver because he wanted to hit some grass or something. So then we drove back to, and I stuck there. So here I am working for a couple of months out in the Wyoming oil fields with the cactus and the antelope and just having fun in a way because out there it's like the wild, wild west. You just show up to work and you do whatever you're told. And I remember one experience, I was on top of a derrick loading 90-weight gear oil out of a 55-gallon drum into the gearbox at the top of this derrick. And it was chained and I was just resting on the top. And just as I was to dump it, the wind came around and I dumped it all over the front of myself. 90-weight gear oil. I was completely saturated in gear oil. Well, anyway, so soon, it wasn't long before somebody, these real interesting characters, showed up on a job site one day. And I thought, these guys are different. These are not your ordinary Wyoming, you know, field workers. They're really different. And finally, I met kind of a leader of these four. They were New Jersey high school graduates out on their high school getaway, and their car broke down out of town. But Larry was really bright, and he really took a liking to me. We became buddies. And so he said, hey, summer's almost over. I got to go back to Maryland to go to college my second year. And he said, why don't you come back with me, drive me back all the way to New Jersey and meet my parents, and then we can go off and I'll get an apartment, it'll be all right, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, the interesting thing is I happen to have a map, you know, a United States map. So I began looking at this map and I decided I was going to go to Manhattan. Now, I'm going to have to backtrack a little bit and tell you part of the story that's really important. So Dave Bradley, my good friend, who had left school, he got a job in Chicago where he was from, kind of middle class, and he was a postal worker and saved his money. Well, he wrote me a letter at the beginning of February and said, Avatar Meher Baba has dropped his body. And even though I knew little about Baba, I was like, oh no. That's just my reaction was, oh my God. And so then sooner or later, he writes me another letter and says, I'm going on a charter to the last darshan. I'm going with a group out of New York City called the Society for Avatar Meher Baba and Dr. Kenmore and Anna Rosa Karish. And that was it. I don't know what I did with the letters. I tossed them or something. But it was just after that this woman called me and asked this guy to pick him up at Stapleton Airport. Just after that. Out of the blue, nothing. And so here now I'm in Gillette, Wyoming, and now somebody from New Jersey is saying, hey, let's go to New Jersey. I had no idea what I was doing, But here I am. So I go off to New Jersey. It was a beautiful drive. Went through all the states, night and day traveling. And his parents were wonderful. He was half Japanese. His father had married his mother in Japan after World War II. And he
Rich,
was,
Rich, how old are you now? You're talking so fast, I'm trying to get in. How
okay, right,
old were you? How old were you when you were in the oil job?
19. I was
Oh, so
19.
you're really young. Oh my God,
Yeah,
all this has happened before you were 19?
yeah,
Oh my gosh. Okay. So now you're going back to Jersey?
yeah, going to Jersey. And
Okay, very good. Thank
thank
you.
you. Yeah,
19.
I, I don't have a time schedule. I don't want to bore everybody. I don't want to take too long. But so
Well,
anyway,
don't talk so fast. So you're talking so
okay,
fast.
okay.
Slow down
So
a little bit. We're enjoying it.
okay, I ended up in Jersey, and Larry shows me all around. I meet all of his friends, his sister, his brother, his mother's Japanese. To talk about clean, she looked right at me and she said, "And when you're done with your bath, you will clean the tub." She was pure
Oh,
Japanese, man. It was amazing. They were a really, really cool middle class family. Well, anyway, so after about 3 days, um, this guy was so ambitious. He'd worked all summer at a toilet factory, porcelain factory, the year before, and bought himself a brand new Camaro in his first year between college. I mean, his second year. So he said, Larry said, "Well, what are you going to do?" And I said, "Larry, I really appreciate it, but I've got to go on to New York City. I've got to." And I didn't know what I was doing. I had no clue. I thought, I've only lived in a cow town, Denver, Colorado. I might as well see a real city. I want to see what a real city is. So, so I jump in my car. He gives me his father's old World War II trunk. That's how this guy was like a brother, just comes out of the blue, man. And so off I go. So I'm driving along, and all of a sudden I get about somewhere with my little map to Manhattan, and I'm in a raging thunderstorm. I mean, it is pounding the car. It's dark at night. I don't know. I'm just on a highway going with the signs, right? So Baba was clearly directing me. I go across a bridge and it says Brooklyn. And I think, I'm not going to Brooklyn. I got to go into Manhattan. So I turned around, went up into the West Side Highway, and I thought, time to get off. I got off at 96th Street, right near Broadway, turned left. I drove 2 blocks down on 97th. That's going towards Riverside Drive. And I find a parking spot. Now, you got to remember, in New York City, there are no parking spots. There are none. You, you got to move your car every day, for the street cleaner every morning. So I find a I get out of my car, I go to an awning right there on the sidewalk, and it's this cheap little tenement hotel, and rent is $25 a month. So I had about $800 in cash from the oil work. And I thought, okay, that's fine and good. So then I go on a street tour during the day. I move my car every day, go on a street tour of Manhattan, and I see what's going on. One day I ended up on Broadway at probably about 105, and there are these black guys having a good time on vodka right on the sidewalk. And this is before Mayor Koch cleaned the place up. And so I buy them a watermelon because they want a watermelon. Had the best time. We were having fun. And anyway, so I made it to the Statue of Liberty, blah, blah, blah. And all this time, you remember, I mean, I don't have any idea what I'm doing. So pretty soon it occurs to me, you can't live here without getting a job. You're going to run out of money. So I went up and down the street on Broadway, and there was the pizza shop and the cigarette shop, and then there was the candy store, and then there was the bakery, and then there was the butcher, and then I mean, they were all right there between 97th and 98th on Broadway, West Side. And so also, fortunately, there was this cutie little fast food place called Rosemar's Deli, and started by Rosemar himself, probably in the 40s. I don't know, maybe the 30s. But so I get a job in the butcher shop, and this guy's an old German, and he puts me in a cold little room and takes all of the clippings out of all of the beef, puts them in a big pot, gives me a big old pepper shaker with raw blood and says, sprinkle it on there and mix it all up. And that was his hamburger. So I've realized after a week of that was not good for me. So I quit, walked down the street, and I got a job at Rosemar's Deli. And these guys just adopted me. It was like 2 weeks into that, they gave me the keys and said, if you need any food, anything, anytime you want, just come to the store and get it. Don't worry about it. It was Danny Rosemar and his two partners, George and Robert from New Jersey. Anyway, they were like, I guess, surrogate fathers to me and all this. So they paid me pretty well. And by the time I was done there, I had a safety deposit box of $2,000 within a year, a lot of cash then. I didn't spend on anything, but I was working one day and they had a telephone in the shop. And I looked at the book and suddenly it dawned on me, I want a copy of God Speaks. That's right. Yeah. Who do I call? Oh, I remember. The Society for Avatar Meher Baba. They'd have it. So here I'm living 24 blocks from the society, straight down Broadway, to 72nd Street. So I called up and a guy named Tommy answered the phone, and I went down on Saturday, and Tony knows these people. So it's like, but anyway, so I go ahead and get a copy of God Speaks from Tommy, and then I go back to my place. And as I started looking through it, started thinking, I think Tommy told me we have meetings on Saturday night, So I'd made sort of a funky friend in the building, and we talked and talked. He was a chemist and had a home somewhere in New Jersey and spent nights in town. But anyway, so he went with me the first time, and we were there at 7:03 or 5. Knocked on the door, and I think Tommy answered the door, and he said, sorry, you're too late. Come back. It started at 7. That was it, man. So off we went, and I didn't do anything. I thought about it for a month. And so then finally I thought I got to try again. So I went back before 7 and I got in the door. And of course, the rest of that story is the same thing that Jeff and Tony and anybody who ever met him or heard him knows. That was Dr. Kenmore center stage, man. That was, like Jeff said this, and I swear it was my experience too. The windows rattled in that place. The light just blew the place up. It was like it came right out of him. And his voice was, well, as big as Moses in the New Testament, on film. He was big. And you don't walk away from that. That's why Baba got me all the way to New York. And I had no plan at all. I just heard about it in that letter from David Bradley, and Baba took me there. Now, there's a couple little footnotes to that. I was born with my right arm, my right shoulder first. So my mother must have been in agony. Imagine shoulder coming first, probably my right arm sticking out. And so my head was flopped way over. Well, I didn't know this. So this is another little detail. Remember the avatar. Talk about details. Baba brings me to the greatest chiropractor in the world. And I got really sick. So Anna Rosa asked doctor, I got x-rays, and a cervical bone right here was a 1/2 inch out all my life. And I knew it when I was 13, but we never went to the chiropractor, although that's an old common German, blue collar thing. So Dr. Kenmore stood over me one day in a session there in his office. He had me lay down on a bench and a stool for my head, separate. And so I'm laying there like this, and I'm looking at him. He's right in front of me. And he doesn't touch my body. And he gets up on probably a little ladder, 2-step ladder. And he bends down, locks his knees, bends down, locks his elbow, makes a fist like that. And he leaves the top of that stool with his arm straight, his shoulder hits my cervical bone directly, and it moves straight in to where it's supposed to be in position, just like that. Never touched my body. I don't know. And then later, in the second time, He gave me a second follow-up adjustment. I could see blue light coming out of his eyes. I'm laying there on my back and he's moving my ankles. And it's like, I'm looking up going, and I know he was looking at me. I could just see that blue. And he, he's a blind guy, right? I mean, he doesn't see his shirt and his colors. He doesn't know what color he's wearing that day. He doesn't know. I mean, if someone gives him coffee instead of tea, he has to taste it. He can't really see that quality of the. So that's a story that a lot of people share. And there was Bob and Beth Gann's big name, Chris Rieger and Francine and Tony, and I think Jose, and I didn't meet Jeff there. So I'll move on to that little story. So one night, a couple of these young kids, because I was sort of one of them, right? I might be 20 now. And we heard about the Monday night group. So, well, I'd like to see what's going on over there. So Francine organized it, as I recall, for me. I think I went there twice. But we went over there, and she knew where the Carnegie Hall was. And just so happened that the guests of honor were, I think it was both Erwin and Ed, and they'd just come back from India, and we're going to talk about it. And I'm sure John Bass was there, and Fred and Ella, but I knew none of these people, and I didn't meet any of them. I just sat and listened to, I think it was Ed, or maybe Erwin and Ed. And but it was either that night or one other night, I went to the Monday night meeting, and this guy comes up to me afterwards, and he starts chit-chatting. And I don't know anybody, but he's young, and everybody else is, not young. And so we're talking, and I'm thinking, it's pretty interesting. He seems to have a grip on things. So we go over to his apartment and talk till probably, I don't know, seemed like 4 a.m, just talking and talking. That turns out to be Jeff Wolverton.
Oh,
Yeah, yay, that was the Jeff. And I never forgot Jeff. Then when I showed up on the center years and years later, it's like, oh my God, it's Jeff Wolverton. So that connection, that happened in New York City. But anyway, so moving forward a little bit, John Bass died while we were there, while I was there, before Dr. Kenmore. And I'm sure Tony remembers this, but there was a funeral home right below Dr. Kenmore's office. And John Bass, that's where he lied in state. And he was in a coffin. And we were all, we circled John Bass's coffin, and we said the prayers. We might have sung the hymns, and it was just an entire group of us with Anna Rosa. Dr. Kenmore, I don't think was there, but just a whole group of us around his coffin. And I didn't really know John at all, never really met him either. But there were connections there that I knew nothing about, of course, throughout New York City, and Dr. Kenmore and Anna Rosa, and then what became Baba House. And
just to interject there,
yeah.
John Bass was one of the early followers of Baba from the 1930s. He was a force himself, but he goes way back with Baba. Yeah.
So at that point, a few little things happened like that were out of the ordinary, but for the most part, I'd show up at the center every Saturday night and with everybody else. And there was a guy named Larry Greenberg, and do not use that name. His name is Larry Green for you South Carolina people. But but anyway, Larry Greenberg, and in a way it was so cool because Dr. Kenmore would pester him about play this one, play that one, And so we heard Dr. Kenmore sing, Swanee, how I love you, my and dear old Baba, I love to be. And he made up words to that one. And he would really sing. I mean, Dr. Kenmore would really get into this stuff. So Larry would be banging away at the piano, and Dr. Kenmore and all of us would be backing him up, singing away. That was every Saturday night after his talk, and then coffee, tea, and cookies, whatever. But I would volunteer once in a while and go transcribe some things for was The Way and the Goal. And then that would get printed up. And now that's a book by Rita and Larry. But in the meantime, I want to make one footnote here. Larry, I don't think I even met Larry. He was in Chicago going to a very astute design school, I believe. Chicago, either Art Institute or School of Art and Design, I'm not sure. So I never really met him. But we went to a wedding one time, and Anna Rosa had bought him a car. It was stashed in New York City in a warehouse. So Dr. Kenmore and I and Anna Rosa and who the heck else was it? I don't know if it was Francine or there was a couple other people. And so Dr. Kenmore was in the front seat, and I know, Chuck Magro was driving. So he's driving this 1968 Firebird, dark green with vinyl top, and we're going to Bob and Beth Gans's wedding. And this is a big deal. And so the part I remember the best is the best part to me. But so he passes, this is a big boulevard, and he passes the turn exit, and so he turns right over the median with this little car and ga-bong, and turns around, U-turn in the middle of the road. And Dr. Kenmore's bouncing around in the front seat, and Hannah's in the back. I think I'm sitting next to her. And so we get to this wedding, and we go in, and it's a very, very high-end Jewish temple, So we go in, and there's a what would you call it, like a meeting room off the entrance. So we're going in the meeting room, and there's all kinds of hors d'oeuvre, hors d'oeuvre. And I mean, there's hot stuff. You could make a meal and a half out of all this stuff, right? And so we're all sitting there on a couch, and pretty soon nobody does anything, says anything. We're just sitting there. We're all muted, Pretty soon Dr. Kenmore gets up because he can smell the food. And so he gets up, and I don't know how I found a plate, but he starts loading a plate. So we all get up, start loading plates. For whatever I knew, this was a meal, and then we're going to go to the wedding. Well, I'm not, I don't come from the blue chip class, so I didn't realize it was just a little taste, So anyway, later we went downstairs, and I don't know how many people were there, 300, who knows, huge room. And Bob and Beth danced around, this stage, and with the, a little umbrella over them? They're under an umbrella. And then Bob crashes the grass under the handkerchief with his foot. That's how it goes. And I think they put him in a chair and danced him around. It was the whole big shebang. And then everybody danced and had a good day. We had like a 5-course meal or something, with everything. And it was a really big deal, we were there for hours. Well, anyway, that was the interesting part about being near the society. Things happened, but anyway, I wasn't very aware of it. But Anna Rosa one day sent me to a proctologist. This was on the Upper East Side, real fancy old doctor's offices. I mean, solid oak everywhere, This guy was proctologist, said right on the glass on the door. She sent me down there to get something for Dr. Kenmore. And whatever he had that was causing him great grief, distress, and it would kill him, this doctor had been working on his anus and rectum, I think. So he was really suffering. And that's why I said that. But a lot of this was in preparation because Dr. Kenmore was going to speak at Baba's birthday party in Barbizon Plaza in 1971. So Anna Rosa told me after this was all over, we did a performance. Tony remembers, he's described it before. Dr. Harry Harmony, and Chris Rigger had a box on his chest, and he was trying to figure out who he was. It was the chest on his chest, And so, and anyway, but after this whole thing, and the Barbizon Plaza was full. The whole theater was totally full. I was sitting at the back, and almost every chair was taken. And so later, Anna Rosa told me that Dr. Kenmore had been in this guy's office for a couple of hours getting a treatment so that he could stand during this entire presentation and say the prayers. He was just really brutally suffering. And then, parts of the rest of the story, but But that was Baba's birthday, 71. And then I think it was in April, Dr. Kenmore died. Anna Rosa had him in her apartment, and they were caring for him up there as they could. And then, but the second time they put him in a cab and took him to a New York General. They got him loaded into a wheelchair, and he was on the sidewalk, and he looked up, and that was it. Goodbye. He left the body right there. He said he had told people he would not go back into the hospital. He hated it going into the hospital, but his body was full of fluid, so they had to drain his body, and that's why he went the first time. Well, anyway, I wasn't really a part of the group because that was a real effort to take care of Dr. Kenmore. And he was, I don't know how long he was in her bedroom up there for 2 or 3 weeks or more, something, but he was essentially dying. But anyway, so through a series of events, I had lost my job at the deli. Actually, I quit, and I regret it now. 55 years later, I regret it, or 54, whatever. But anyway, so Anna Rosa assigned me to sit in this room. It was a huge room, and Dr. Kenmore was sitting over there with curtains, these long velvet curtains, like a 12-foot high ceiling or something. And I sat there for about 5 days, and then they had this ceremony, and there were, and I tell this story because these little details reinforce the methodical way Baba manages everybody in his orbit. But so after the service is over, Anna Rosa, we got together, and she told me, she see the guy sitting there and his 2 daughters and his wife. Well, that man had money, and he had been to every doctor he could find. He'd been to Europe, spent a lot of money, and he was sick for a few years. No one could diagnose this guy. No one. And this is written down. I think it's in Reed and Larry's book. But and at one point, both of his daughters, and I think they were twins, but both of his daughters, I think she said they had their third eye open. But anyway, they became psych. They could see entities. They could see ghosts and entities, and the little world, we'll call it the Akashic world, but that world between gross and the first plane. But and they told their father and mother, they said, "Dad, there's something all over you. There's these things all over you." And so he sought out, evidently people had heard, he sought out Dr. Kenmore. And Dr. Kenmore was known for clearing the auras of all kinds of people, of entities, strange people. He would actually go in and get rid of all these entities. And that is one of the methods he used to heal people. So that could have been another little reason why Baba connected me with Dr. Kenmore. However, all I know is that these two little girls reported to Anna Rosa that there was an angel at each end of that coffin that was 10 or 12 foot high. All the time I was sitting there with big angels, and I had no idea, but they could see them. So it was a real interesting experience that Baba, I mean, he took me from Denver, Cowtown, all the way to downtown Manhattan. And one other thing really needs to be said about Dr. Kenmore. This guy loved the opera, and he had, like, I don't know, 1,000 albums or something. And he loved that kind of music. And he would walk to the Lincoln Center and on his own, no dog, only with a white stick. And of course, Jeff has told this story before, but evidently he could see where he was going in the subtle world or something like that, in the composite world. I don't know. But so he didn't need a dog. But he loved that music. And I practiced over and over and over with an album, and I think he left it there, was by Mario Lanza. And if you want to hear what Dr. Kenmore might have sounded like with Begin the Begin, get an old copy of Mario Lanza, Begin the Begin. And I mean, this is opera. This is the real stuff. This is people who know how to sing. When they begin the begin, they shout it out. so moving right ahead here. So when Doctor died, we all picked out an urn for him downstairs, and he was going to be cremated after that. And I left town. I called Anna Rosa from what is it called? The bus, where all the buses came in and out of New York City. I called her on a payphone and said, I'm leaving. I was going to the airport. So I left and I went back to Denver. And then I sort of hung out. I got a job and started working. And then Anna Rosa wrote me a letter and said, if you would like to come to New York and travel with us to India for the 72 Amartithi, then you're welcome. And a man named Peter Gans will pay for the half of it, and you will pay him back. You'll pay the other half. And so between my mom and my dad, they actually paid my share of all that stuff. And but since I had to pay Peter back, when I got back, I got a job and I paid Peter Gans back the $300. But that was a gift through Anna and probably Bob Gans, of course, Bob and Beth. But so that was how I got to India. And I bought a bunch of pictures from, was it Pandhar in Ahmednagar?
Hyundai.
Yes, Pandi. I had a bunch of those pictures when I came back. And that's really all I really had. And I put a big one on the wall above my bed with Baba on the tiger rug with his fingers in a circle. And that's the same picture they used at Amartithi this year on that big, big, big sheet, behind the stage at Amartithi this year. Exact same picture. But so I got a little lost that first year, I had trashy sanskars from probably 22 or 2,200 lifetimes, or who knows, just trash. So I didn't know what to do with myself, really. So I kind of floundered. And eventually I had to separate from my parents. I couldn't stay in that house. And I really still didn't have a handle truly of taking care of myself. But I think the real thread that I've tried to string through all this with Baba's help and your attention is that I was never meant to do something in the world for the sake of doing something in the world. I was never going to do that. And I didn't know how to do it, but I'd already been told about reality. So I knew that. So I was lost, but not the way most people are lost. So anyway, I floundered around. I ended up downtown Denver, and you could live anywhere down there for practically nothing. And I was just hanging out here and there. And so I got connected with a whole group of baby boomers that were following a guy named Guru Maharaji. And he was downtown Denver. And they were working and paying him all their incomes. They had several vegetarian like homes that they all lived in, kind of like ashrams, usually split male and female. And he had 3 floors in a high-rise downtown, his headquarters. So I just hung out, and they bought an old church, and I needed the social part of that really desperately. And so it was a very social milieu for me. But in any case, it wasn't a real spiritual adventure of any kind. And I never got any special meditation to do or anything like that. So I wasn't really connected. But in the meantime, one day it occurred to me, I'd like to reread the discourses by Avatar Meher Baba. So I went to a bookstore that was owned by a guy that was married to a Baba lover. I didn't know that at the time. And right next to a famous folk music store. And so I started reading this thing, and suddenly I thought, well, I got to do something here. So Adi Keirani's address was in that book. So I wrote Adi a letter, and he said, I will be in Myrtle Beach on June 2nd of 1977. And so the one thing when you're sort of semi-homeless or just a vagabond or a derelict is my word, and that's pretty much all I ever was, a derelict, was you needed a bicycle. right? I mean, that's just the way to go. So I had a brand new bicycle. I'd gotten a job, and I thought, I just got a brand new bicycle. I got a place to live. I got a job. I don't know if I'm going to make it to Myrtle Beach. So I went to one of these satsang meetings at the church, came out, and there was another guy standing beside me, and both of our bicycles were gone. They got stolen. I showed up for work the next day, and the guy says, "You really can't do this job. You're fired." This is who? Guess who? So off to the bus station, one-way ticket, Myrtle Beach. And so there I go, 24 hours on a bus. And with no room for your legs, right? So, daylight, deep night, can't see a thing. There's no moonlight. And somewhere, probably in, I don't know where, probably Tennessee, the bus is going up one hill and down the other. Then it turns and it does a 180 turn, goes up a hill in deep, dark night. I had to stand up and go stand by the bus driver. I was just about ready to get seasick. It was. So anyway, that was my journey. So I got let off at 10:30 p.m. at the bus station in Myrtle Beach. And there's a big pine tree out in front. And I have a jean jacket and a backpack full of vitamins. And that's I think I had God's speech. But anyway, so I think now what to do? It's 10:30 p.m. It's dark. There's no moon. It's starting to sprinkle. It might rain. So I crawled under this big pine tree and slept there all night. Very comfortable. And then I thought, now, where the heck is the center? I didn't have a map. I didn't know where the center was. So I began walking down 17 north to North Carolina. And about the time I made it all the way to the border, this is one whole day, so the State Patrol of South Carolina stops me and searches all my stuff. He's looking to see if I have drugs. And I showed him everything and he was happy. And I said, "I'm trying to get to the center. Can you help me out?" And he just ignored me. And I mean, I'm sure he knew where it was, but he ignored me. So I was at the state line. So I thought, well, got to turn around. So I turned around, started walking the other way, went down to the beach. And all I knew was there was a green gate. The only thing I knew, there was a green gate. So I walked on the beach for a while, and it got dark and cold, and the wind was coming off the beach. It was June 5th or something. And so at this one motel, they had a stairwell, and underneath the stairs was a hot water closet. So I went in there, closed the door, and had a real nice, comfortable sleep. Just nice and warm and cozy. And I mean, it was great. And so at about 6 a.m, some guy opens the door, and the sunshine hits my head, and he's hit me with a broom with my feet. He's using his broom to tap me, and he says, "Hey, you got to get out of here. And get off the property." So I grab my boots and I go next door and sit down on the beach and start putting my boots on. So then I start walking the beach, and I don't know where I'm going. And I figure this isn't going to work because I can't see a green gate from here because I'm not on 17. So finally, I get on 17 and I'm walking, and oh my God, on the east side of the highway, there's a green gate, and there's weeds everywhere. And I'm thinking, wow, that's really weird. You'd think there'd be a lot of traffic coming through this gate. Well, it turns out there's a north gate and there's a south gate. And so I just hop over the north gate and walk into all these weeds and rocks and trees and going, this has got to be the center. So, I don't know what. Anyway, so I walk and walk and walk, and I end up, someone sees me and says, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, is this the center, the Hair Spiritual Centers?" Yeah. Well, come with me. So Adi K was speaking that night. I managed to catch him, and they took me over to Laura Della Vigna's house, which is adjacent to the center. You can walk into the center from there. An old Bob lover. You want to comment on her, Jeff?
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, she goes way back with Baba, but she lived over in Briarcliff, just north of the center. Wonderful, wonderful, gracious woman. You know, had met Inayat Khan. She went way back to the 20s with him.
Wow, wow. I did not know that. And so she had passed away and they were using her house. They must have got that through the will. And big, tall guy, skinny guy, got me some big clothes, like a large size shirt sleeves down to my elbows and, rolled up the pants. But I was clean to see Audie. So I had a little something to eat. Went over to the meeting place with them and listened to Audie. And I can tell you that while I was there looking at Audie, I swear I could see inside of Audie. It was like, I'm guessing here, but it was like seeing Baba inside of Audie. It was like there was this guy inside of Audie and he was doing the talking, And he was sitting on like a throne, not just a chair. And it's like, it was just a presence. But I don't really remember too much what I said, but I love the way Audie talked, expressed himself. However, that ended. So I got up and I was very dysfunctional. And we'll go back, as I said, I'd had all these difficulties dealing with the real world. And of course, that included knowing how to relate to people, anybody really. It was just a psychological barrier and also 22,000 lifetimes of trashy karma. And so I got into an argument with a guy there right in the meeting hall just after the talk. And so they took me aside and it was the tall guy. I don't think it was Jonathan. It was the guy that went into real estate. Can't remember his name.
Walter.
But Walter. And Walter was really nice. He's a prince, I fell in love with Walter just in the way he treated me. He was just so kind. But anyway, and they took me back over to Laura's house. And about an hour later, there's this woman who shows up at the door. And I think I'm in a bedroom. She opens the door to the bedroom and she leans in and she's big busted, big chested. And, she looks like a grandma. She leans in and she looks at me. Very stern, very stern. And she says, "How did you get here?" I said, "A bus, one-way ticket." So you have no way back. No. So what you're going to do is you're going to get on a bus tomorrow and you're going to go back to Denver and Earl Starcher is going to pay for your ticket and you're going to pay him back. This is a common theme in my life. Pay him back. So sure enough, Earl Starcher and his Volkswagen Rabbit, a red Rabbit.
That was Elizabeth, right?
That was Elizabeth.
That's the way she thought.
That was Elizabeth. And I'm telling you, if you've ever looked at a 12 gauge shotgun from the open end up, that was Elizabeth. She wasn't going to tolerate anything out of me. And she was serious. And
So Rich,
Yeah.
Rich, so you were giving them a lot of trouble. Is that it?
That's it. I did it to myself.
Oh,
And so
Oh.
in my mind, Marta, I was going to live in Myrtle Beach the rest of my life. I was going to, become a member of this magnificent Baba community. And Elizabeth thought, man, can you imagine the trouble this guy will cause in this community? Not to mention for himself, he can't stay here. There's no way. So, that's, So Elizabeth made a decision and it was, I'm sure, the right decision, but it was extremely painful for me. However, so here's the next part of the story. Baba takes care of every little detail. This blew my mind when it happened. So Earl puts me on a bus and I apologize. That's the next year. This was 1977 in June. So first of all, I go back to Denver and I find a job and I'm working and working for this guy and they're rebuilding homes and it was quite interesting. And I'd saved up a little money. So about this time, I got connected with the Denver group, but I just got connected and met the group, Dixon Staples, Elaine, Nick, Janet Scott, a few people. So, and Winnie Barrett. And so anyway, about this time, I had enough money, so I bought a round trip airplane ticket to Myrtle Beach. And as far as I'm concerned, I wasn't thinking about staying. I just wanted to go to Myrtle Beach because by this time, you know, I was like a sponge and I wanted more of Baba's love and juice, but I had no idea because I was just too dysfunctional of how to fit in with the rest of the world. But I was working at it at my best, we'll say that. So I get on a plane, I go to Myrtle Beach, and I'm there 1 or 2 days, and I got sort of fixated on this girl. I don't know who she was, from Oregon. And, you know, I had all these romantic fantasies going in my head. So I followed him down to the beach, and nothing really happened, but it was really worrisome to her. And because it was like, no, she's there for Baba to relax on the beach, and here's this guy is chasing after her or something, you know. So bottom line is, it wasn't real tawdry or anything, but it was completely inappropriate. And so somebody got back to the center, and a couple of guys came down. Malcolm was one of them, and Dennis, I think, the other. And they put handcuffs on me and drug me back to the, no, they were really nice. They said, what's going on here, you know? And I said, oh, blah, blah, blah. And they said, well, we're going to have to take you back onto the center. And so I think, can't remember exactly how this happened, but here I am again doing this to myself. And so we go back and have a little something neat, and Dennis becomes my chaperone. But in the meantime, Elizabeth shows up. And she looks at me, and I'm sure she already had decided a couple of things. One is, she said, how'd you get here? I said, oh, an airplane, you know? And she said, well, do you have a round trip ticket? And I said, yeah. And she's, well, let me see him. So she's looking at him, they're looking at him. And they noticed that you can leave Myrtle Beach anytime, just get on a plane and go. But you can't leave Atlanta until the day of your scheduled flight. So she says, well, you're going to get on an airplane tomorrow and you're going to Atlanta. And I've got a $20 bill, or 10, I can't remember. And that's all I've got. And so sure enough, I don't remember who took me to the airport. I remember one time going to the airport with Jeff, and Ella was in the car. Fred had passed, but I don't think it was that time. So somehow I got to the airport, and I remember Elizabeth saying, make sure he gets on that plane, you know, blah, blah, blah. But of course, so that was done. I was on the plane and I got back to Denver, and I called somebody that I'd met in the Denver group named Nick. And I said, Nick, can I borrow $40? I want to go back to Myrtle Beach. I'll take a bus, you know. And Nick says, let me think about this. So he talked to his wife. They talked it over. He says, meet me at the House of Pies. Well, anyway, that's the next phase of my little story here. But in the meantime, I'm stuck in Atlanta. I walk off the airport and I walk over to this little motel, which services the airport, little 2-story place. And all I've got on is like a jean jacket, right? A little backpack maybe. But anyway, so I'm walking around and it's starting to rain. And I think, well, got to find somewhere to sleep. It's dark night. So I go and I hide behind the shrubbery against the building of this motel. And this is just Baba. Baba is right there. So here I'm laying there, I'm about to go to sleep. And all of a sudden I hear this chatter, these people, I can hear them talking. And I look up and there's a balcony above me and they've spotted me. And then I hear this big engine roar, and these 2 headlights hit the bush I'm in. And it's like the police come and grab me. I've been nabbed. So they take me into the office and they ask the manager, do you want to press charges of trespassing against this guy? And they ask me my story and I tell them a little of this stuff. And I was very, very, very somber. I wasn't sad. I was just, it's not what you're hearing now. Oh, I wouldn't say a thing hardly. And I'm thinking, for some reason, it just came over me that I'm not in charge of this. The two police officers and the building manager, the motel manager, they're in charge. So they get done talking and they don't know what to do and nothing will work and there's no way to help me get to Denver. So the police officer turns to me and he says, well, what do you think we should do? And I said, well, I think you should arrest me and take me to jail if that's what you want to do. Because that was the motel guy had nothing to do with it. So there was a guy, a tall young guy, about 19, standing back at the door listening to all this. And he said, I got an idea. I'll take him to my apartment and I'll bring him back at the day of his flight and drop him off because that's my next scheduled day of work. And he was the driver for clientele at the motel. And I think his name was Jim. And he was the nicest guy you'd ever want to meet. And he was going to Bible college and his wife was on tour with the Bible college course in Europe. And so I stay there, meet his roommates, and I show him all these beautiful pictures I got, Hermes pictures I got, black and white, from the center about Baba. And he says, oh, that's really interesting. And we're right next to the Bible college. So, and he says, well, I have this work to do, so I have to go to work. So you just do whatever you want. And I wandered around and they fed me. And, I took showers and I was just a guest in their motel there at the Bible college. Anyway, so that's how that thing ran out. And he took me to the airport. I got on my flight, boom, went right back home. And the thing that amazed me was, look how powerful Elizabeth was. She says, you're going to Atlanta. That's it. She didn't make any arrangements. She gave it to Baba. And Baba set me up in an apartment with meals, laundry, you name it. and a ride back to the airport. So anyway, so I got back to Denver, called Nick. And so we got to the House of Pies in Denver. And he says, I got an offer. And you can come and live with my wife and I. It's okay with her. And you can stay there until you get back on your feet. And so I'd had this job for over a year working this construction thing, but their home was not near that. So that was over. So I settled in at their house. And over time, through the Denver group and through Nick and his efforts, which were amazingly magnanimous, I got into group therapy. Denver had mental health centers at that time. They paid for. They don't have that stuff anymore. But it was really an astounding effort that Nick Descalos and Janet and even Dixon Lane and the group, even Winnie, put into domesticating me. They found this wild animal Baba lover, and they decided this guy's all right. He just needs a push and help. So finally, Nick got me into working on cars. And my dad had an automotive shop and he'd been a mechanic and he was a genius, really. So I started working on cars and that led one thing to another. And I started working in restaurants. And so I learned how to work. And then I got a girlfriend and my life was pretty much stable. And the Denver group was like a big extended family. It was really hardcore Baba love every Sunday night. And it was quite wonderful. But anyway, so at that point, I was sort of on my own. So I did 4 years of college just to socialize myself and recommit myself to an education instead of just hanging out doing nothing. And then I learned to work on vehicles, and I got a very decent job in a really good automotive shop, working on all kinds of stuff. And then I got a job working for the electric company in Denver, and that was like hitting the jackpot. Full retirement, healthcare, everything, you name it. And so I did that 7 years, and then there was a bunch of political goings on. And at the same time, it was time. I think what happened is Baba thought it was time for me to go out into the world and figure it out kind of on my own. So basically, I went to some of the group meetings, but it wasn't my home anymore, to put it bluntly. And so a job came up over here in Grand Junction, and this was in 96. So in 94, I was living downtown in an apartment, no girlfriend, and I ended up going to Myrtle Beach with a guy named Paul. And Paul is now an Australian citizen, and he's married to Therese. And he was in California for a long time with the northern group there and Marana. So so Paul and I were kind of buddies and hung out for about 6 months. He was really into mountain biking, and he's a very good athlete. And Paul and I drove all the way down to Padre Island to see his grandmother. We drove all the way to Myrtle Beach and spent about a week in February. It was really cold. When the wind blew there, it was so humid, we weren't used to it. Blows right through your clothing. But at that time, I picked up something I still have, and it's a large painting of Meher Baba by Susan White. But that sort of capped off a series of visits, 81, 84, 85, 6, 7, and 91, then 94 that I made to Myrtle Beach. And the first one in 81, I was so nervous, and I thought, oh my God, I don't want to get kicked off the center. And I didn't know, but Elizabeth had passed away. But I was really worried about being on the center again because I didn't want to misbehave at all. So I was really worried. But Winnie Barrett called him and said, he's okay. He's doing fine. You know, it's not, he won't be a problem. So I got there and there was no one on the center. I don't think there was one person staying on the center. And Lee was building the reading room on Del Ruba, right? The Del Ruba Library there. He was building the reading room. So I went over there and helped him with the cement one day. So, and I got familiar with rowing the boat all by myself out on Long Lake. And I really had a great time. And then 84, 5, 6, and 7 were college years. So I went every May, and I met everyone who was associated with Myrtle Beach and the center during those years. I'd stay a week, and I met Jeff, of course, and Jane, and Charles, and Charles's brother John was there one summer. And a big, tall, athletic dude, really nice guy. So I happened to encounter all these people. Well, they kind of became my home away from home family, you know. So I met Nan, and I met Hermes a couple times, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I know I met Jeff, and I really felt, and I mean, at the time, Jim Meyer was married to Deborah and had kids, and there was Gary, he would sing Suka, Suka, Suka. He would sing this outrageous song, and the whole meeting place would just light up. I mean, and Jim Meyer songs, The Tavern, oh my God, if you've never heard The Tavern, man, I mean, he sings. So the real happening was in Myrtle Beach back in those years, and Jeff was a big part of all that. Anyway, so that part of my story with Myrtle Beach was a truly sacred binding for me. And I always wanted to live there, and I could never work it out between income and life experience and whatever. So I ended up here, bought a house, and completely redid the house, became a reasonably good mechanic. And I mean, every wire nut, window, door, everything in this house is my own doing. It's just an old house, and I recreated it. And so I've had some dogs along the way, and they've been my companions, and I still have one. But what's happened recently in the last 5, 7 years, a lot of you know this, aging is not merciful. And so now I can do very little without planning for it in terms of the energy I have, how much strength I have. And so I have a dog, and I swear that Baba is my companion through that dog. He has been the best friend for 12 years. It's hard to express it, but it brings me to tears when I think of all the love that I've received directly from dogs. And this dog in particular is very unusual. And he's on his way to maybe a year, but so that's my status. I managed to meet quite a few people in the local community because once I connect with people, I leave an impression. As Elizabeth reminded me.
Now, Rich, I guess like it's getting a little bit late, but
Yeah,
how about what would you say in summation, what Baba has been, what he has been for you, what he has done for you, how,
I think in my early years, I was very less conscious of Baba. I knew who Baba was. It reminds me a little of what Robert Dreyfuss said when he came back from meeting Baba to the Monday night group. There's a YouTube video of it. He said, I went from here to here. And Jeff, you've told that story.
Yeah.
But it's taken a lot longer for me to go from here to even near here, But I finally, what happened, I'll cap this off by telling one more little story. Last summer, I'd gotten a dog, had her for 5 years to be a companion to Audie. He's my other dog. So Audie, the dog, needed a friend, a girlfriend. And I decided I would deliberately love her. And I mean deliberately. I would nurture her personality. I would do anything I could for her and give her direct attention and love, because that's what dogs had been doing for me. And so I was determined, and that's what I did. And she was really feisty. I think a little bit of pit bull in her and terrier, and really strong, originally a runaway. So her name was Mani. And so Mani and Adi. But anyway, so last summer I was working on something in the garage, and I went to check on her, and she was, I built a ramp for them to look over the fence at people in the alleys, and she was lying on it. And I didn't notice the first time, but the second time I went out, and she had died of a heart attack right there on the ramp. And that was 5 years old. And what that did is something inside of me broke. And I suddenly realized that that I had lost the opportunity of love, that I had lost the opportunity to love. And not having been really properly married or involved with others at that level, like many of you have, I haven't. And so it was Baba. I have not developed properly the opportunity to love, to cherish, to love, and to be given love from a dog, and to give love to a dog is special. But I truly can't really imagine sharing true love or love with Baba with another human being. It's beyond me. But that's been broke. That's really it. Thank you, Jeff, and thank you for everyone's attention. Thank you.
thank you. Beautiful. Um, what what a beloved we have, who comes to us in a way we are open to.
Richard, did, did you have brothers or sisters?
Yes.
Did I have what?
He was asking if you had brothers and sisters, and Ralph might not have been there at the beginning, but yeah.
Yes, I'm completely estranged from my brother, bit of an alcoholic, and he could see what a chump I'd been in different situations through the years. So his judgment is for him. And my sister, we're actually still, I think, dear friends and close. She became more of a Christian evangelist. And you know, our bond goes beyond that. But she was on the center. She brought her whole family to the center in 85 probably. And her son's been in the lagoon cabin, but he's still living the life, you know. He's still out there trudging through the illusion.
Hey, so I'll read this quote. I ran across this quote, and then we'll have like a few moments of silence. And Rich, thank you for your wonderful journey. I mean, what a journey. And if there's anybody amongst you here that would like to share your story next week, you are just let me know. And I'm thinking on Baba's birthday, which is Sunday, that we won't have a meeting that night because you'll be very busy, I'm sure. So here's a final quote. These are Baba's words. If the individual desires the enforcement of equilibrium in the true direction, a consistent acceleration of feelings should be made so that feelings supersede thoughts. That is, the heart supersedes the mind. To achieve this, the only effective fuel is love, unadulterated love. Unless one learns to love in its true sense, one cannot cross the hurdle of the mind. And for one to understand love in its true sense, the only recourse is to dedicate oneself to the Lord of love and to hold fast under all circumstances to his feet. Any deviation from self dedication will lead one astray from the path of divine love. So, just a few moments of silence. Jai Baba.
Hey, Baba. Hey, Baba.
One last quote that someone told me the other day, which is, "He who begs for my love is mine. He who begs for my love is mine." It's a beautiful thought. Anyway, Rich, thank you. That was so touching. Anyone have something to say? Anything to share?
I just want to say that that was the most fantastic story, Rich. So heartfelt, so open-hearted. I mean, I am so touched by your story. I'm touched by your vulnerability. I mean, what a story. It's just amazing. I had no idea. I was at the edge of my seat the entire time. It's like great.
Wow.
Thank you, Rich. It was just amazing story. Amazing. Baba has you. Baba really has you.
Yeah, and it's Baba's side of the story. This is his great joy in creation. Is to put someone on the line and reel them in, even if it takes time.
I
Beautiful.
love stories, and I'd love to hear everyone's here. I've known Bob a long time, but I only know bits and pieces of his story because
Yeah.
some of this stuff is very intimate for people. You know, it's hard to express it maybe.
We've got a couple of hands there. Marion, go ahead.
Yes. Thank you for this opportunity, Richard, for me to say something, because the word love, which is not an emotion, it is a state of being. And that is so awakened in me through your story, where I really was able to walk with you and go through that with you. And so I love you. I mean that in the highest sense, and walk with you. And you are so perfect, just as you are. Thank you.
Thanks. Beautiful.
Tony? Yeah, Richie, I just feel so honored and touched to hear your story. I mean, we go back a long way, and I had no idea about most of it. And just a couple of things I noted down. Um, I was at the birthday celebration in 71 you talked about, and it was only years later that I saw a picture of Harry that's on the stage. At the time, I performed in it actually. At the time, I had no idea he was ill, and when I saw the photo, he was almost wasted away. He died in May, and then the play was in for Silence Day. It was the next one. Um, I when you talked about the Guru Maharaji, which I had heard about, so that you had been involved, and I was always wondering what the story was. Do you know Amrit, Dara and Amrit?
Uh, I only
Bobby,
met, I met Amrit once at Winnie's in Denver. I
well,
bought a piece of jewelry from her. Yeah.
she grew up in Dehradun, right next door. The Guru Maharaji was billed, I remember at the time, as the 12-year-old perfect master, and she was about the same age as him, and she was really pissed off that he was getting all this attention, and our poor Baba is being neglected. And the next time she ran into him, she beat him up.
Really? Yeah. 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 He was only 18 when he came to Denver, and he had a good friend in a jet plane and a Rolls Royce, you know.
The other thing you mentioned, Harry going to the opera just with him and his cane. And I realized I haven't touched this for decades, but this is one of Harry's canes. We got to take some of his things when he passed. And that was the other thing. Let's see. Oh, yeah, I wasn't in on that in group. You were more on that in group than I was. And I didn't get invited to the wedding because I wasn't part of it. I just went to the talks every week. And um, um, and I remember, when you say about the dysfunction and the methadone, that's how I remembered you from then. And particular, I've joked about it with you, but when you were rehearsing your part for Harry Harmony, now you sound like Mario Lanza, for God's sake. But back then, you were walking through the rooms of the society, going, "When they begin, when they begin, when."
Yep.
It was
Right
touching.
key.
It was touching. There's one other thing. Oh yeah, and Anna got involved with my going to India in 72. I had a key part in the play and in the music and everything else, but I was so grateful to be able to go. But I didn't have the money, and she had Bob Gans lend me the money, but I had to pay him back. And I said, "Well, I'm going to school. I don't have a job." So they sent me to work for Bob's father, his
Wow.
business, that's Peter Gans. And so
Yeah.
I had to work for him and pay it off out of it was, thank you. I don't thank Anna Rosa for a lot of things, but I have to say that's one of those things got me to India. That's all, but mainly, and I've been in touch with Francie. You mentioned her a few times, and yeah, we're all connected in a way that I don't think we even understand. And thank you again so much. I feel your heart in these Zoom talks, but now I felt it at its depth, and thank you for being that naked.
I love your brother, Tony.
Yeah,
I,
me too. Me too.
Let's go, Bob. There now. Bob is one of the Denver group. You actually went to high school with Rick Chapman, didn't you?
No, that was Doug Anderson.
Oh, Doug, and okay.
Yeah, one thing that Rich didn't mention is that Rich, you had an apartment in Denver for quite some time, and I remember when we were having Baba meetings at various places, we'd take turns having Baba meetings, and so you had them at your place. I don't know, every few weeks it was your turn, and you'd have Baba meetings there, and they were always so wonderful. So I've heard bits and pieces of your story, but to hear the whole thing strung together was just absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much, my friend. And when the weather gets a little nicer, I hope to drive on over to Grand Junction to visit my daughter, and I will definitely call you if I make it. So, Jai Baba.
You know, just as a little sidelight, uh, I went, I was up there with Darwin and Gene Shaw with that group up there, and one guy came to the meeting, and he seemed to really uh, be into Bob. He seemed to be lit up and everything. So, and this buddy of mine and I, we were coming down to the center to stay on the center, and this guy asked if he could go, and so we said okay, and so I remember Gene Shaw saying, kind of cryptically, "Three's a crowd," But so we came down, and actually turned out he was like a little bit crazy. So he came to the center, and he thought it was Jay Baba, Jay, Jay Baba, and he was this guy. Any scene, he would become such a center of attention. I mean, he just was a force unto himself, and so we were a little bit embarrassed. Him, in fact, when he went over to see Elizabeth, he was sitting in a chair, and I saw Elizabeth kind of circle him, kind of like some kind of significantly. What is she circling? I mean, going around, talking, and going around this chair, and I didn't think anything of it. But a couple of days later, he was a little bit disruptive. So he had wandered over to one of the houses, off the center, and he was there. And this buddy of mine, we were called over there to meet. We didn't know what for. And then a little while later, Elizabeth comes in her car, and so she comes there, and he says, "Oh, Elizabeth, what brings you here?" She says, "Well, I've come to say goodbye." "Oh, where are you going?" "No, I've come to say goodbye to you. And these two boys here, that's me and this buddy, they're going to take you back to where you came from." So, oh my God, we had another 16 hours driving back, taking this guy back. But the way she said it, "Well, I've come to say goodbye." "Oh, well, where are you going?" "I've come to say goodbye to you." She had a very kind of, it wasn't mean. She was just very measured and very kind of eloquent, and there was something commanding even in her very soft-spoken manner. So you're not the only one that got run out of town. And she would often say, "And make sure he gets on the bus," or gets on the plane, 'cause anyway. Anyway, I guess I'll say goodbye to all of you. Thank you for coming, and thank you, Rich. Well, is there anybody who feels like they wouldn't mind sharing their story? I mean, and we can ask questions along the way. I mean, Rich had, his was pretty. We couldn't break in. You had it all very clearly in mind. But anybody have a? Am I gonna have to come up with a topic? God, I've already come up with about 300 of them. What about Bob Yeager? Someone says.
Um,
Don't feel at all.
okay, no, I could do that. Okay, yeah,
Yeah, don't, no pressure at all.
One of the things, Bob, I would
Yeah,
like,
no pressure at all. Yeah, right.
No, I mean, you can back out of it, Bob.
I remember,
Bob Yeager. No, but just only if you want.
I remember telling my story to, I don't know, you asked me once before to tell my story, and
Yeah.
I did. So, but maybe it wasn't in this gathering, maybe it was something else.
No, it was in something else.
Okay, yes,
It was on maybe. I think it might have been an arty. One of the
oh,
arties.
I think that's what it was.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, anyway, yes, sure, I'm quite willing to.
And throw in a couple of your poems as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
one of the things that, Bob, I want you to include, I'm being pretty upfront here, but I didn't know for years that you only have one good eye. And I'm sure that would be a surprise to everyone.
We all know now.
Yep.
I just got a new plastic eye last month too.
All right.
Looking good.
Yeah, we can't
Hey,
tell.
Jeff, I wanted to clarify something. That last story you told, that wasn't Rich that you were talking about, was it?
No. This was a guy that went
Okay, I
to
just
one-
want to clarify that. All right.
Yeah.
You mean
Okay, good.
he had wandered over to someone's house in Briarcliff? Is that right?
Yeah, over to Malcolm's actually.
Oh, Malcolm's. Oh,
But on the way down is the 16-hour drive, and he was
Yeah.
talking the whole time. And we stopped at one point, and then I said, Ken, my buddy, have you been listening to him? Because I had to tune out. He said, no, I haven't been listening. I thought you were listening. He just couldn't, what there's that Baba saying where Baba says, mind working normal is man, mind working fast is mad, mind working slow is must, mind stopped is God. This was mind working fast. We knew we were in trouble, and Gene Shaw saying, "Beat the crowd." She, she picked that up. She was very intuitive, and we were kind of ignorant.
We had to leave with the ones that brung him.
But, yeah,
I've got a curiosity issue about, I'd like to, Rich, you were close to your parents, particularly your mom. And did you have an ongoing rapport? I mean, you say you just took off with the guy and ended up in a job on the oil patch in Wyoming.
Oh, I didn't really tell part of the story, Ralph. You're
Where are
right.
your parents during all this? You know they've
Well-
got to be wondering where you are, what's happened to you. I'm surprised they didn't put a search party out, so on and so forth.
Well, without going into too much detail, because we're pretty late for you guys on the East Coast. But what happened was that second time on the center, I was in the original kitchen with Dennis. He was chaperoning me, and there was a group playing Baba favorite songs on a little cassette recorder. And it was either Welcome to My World by Jim Reeves or There's a Heartache Following Me. But my father was a good singer, and my mom would harmonize with him. And they liked that country music. So I'd grown up with Welcome to My World and Jim Reeves. And so this song came on, and I was in the middle of a real dark blackness. I mean, it's like, I'll never be able to, what am I going to do without Baba? I can't, I'll never come to the center again. Oh no. And it's like, in the middle of all that, I had a visionary experience where I was walking into this little Grange hall, and in my vision, and I heard music, and I heard this singing, welcome to my world, won't you come on in, miracles, I guess. And as I walked up towards the microphone, the old big microphones they had, the old phones, and as I looked up, it was my father singing this song, but it was Baba's eyes in my father. And from that moment on, my relationship with my father healed 100%.
beautiful.
Didn't get to tell that part.
Yeah, lovely. Well, the final Avatar Mir Baba will be presented by Nasreen.
Yes, yes, indeed. Okay, ready?
Yes.
Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai.
Hey,
Okay,
Jai.
folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. Thank you all. Jai Baba. Yeah.
Jai Baba.
Jai.
Jai Baba. Jai Baba.
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 Dinesh, it was nice to see Dinesh there. Yeah.
Yeah, after long I could join Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful.
Thank you, Rich. That
Yeah,
was
as
excellent.
usual. Yeah.
Thank you
And-
for listening. But I'll tell you, Baba, he just, he's pulled me all the way. Just pulled
Yes.
me all the way. That's it.
I can,
Every other detail.
I can see that very clearly. Yes, you were meant to be his.
By the hair too.
You were meant to be his. Very, very touching. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Jai Baba.
And you
Thanks,
notice
Jeff.
he pulled you by the hair and there's nothing left.
Yeah, he got all of them.
Okay.
All right. Hey, thank you. Good night.
Okay, Bob.
Good night. Yeah, wow.